Hello. Whoa. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire. Welcome to another McNally Jackson event. Thank you so much for coming. I just wanted to do a couple quick housekeeping notes before we turn the mic over. So if you didn't grab your voucher or your book, you can grab it at the table at the top of the stairs. The vouchers are only good for this evening, but they are good for anything in the store, including the bar. So help yourself, but it's only $5 just for tonight. Additionally, there will be time for Q&A after our discussion, so please feel free to think about your questions now. And finally, after the Q&A, we will be having a signing. It's going to be over there, and we will direct you to please form an orderly line to the best of everyone's ability. But before I turn it over, I just want to give a quick introduction. So we are here to celebrate the inimitable Alice Carriere, her book, Everything, Nothing, Someone, a New York Times Editor's Choice. It was on several best of lists for 2023, and personally my best of list for 2023. And so really quick, let me just give a quick rundown. Alice Carriere is a graduate of Columbia University. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, New York Magazine, and Oprah Daily. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and Amagansett, New York. Everything, Nothing, Someone is her first book. Michael Imperioli is an award-winning actor, writer, director, and producer known for his roles in HBO's The Sopranos, The White Lotus, and currently Hulu's hit series This Fool. He has worked with many renowned directors, including Spike Lee, with whom he has also co-scripted and co-produced the feature Summer of Sam. He was recently seen on Broadway opposite Jeremy Strong in a record-breaking and award-winning run of Ibsen's An Enemy of the People. Michael is a New York Times bestselling author of Woke Up This Morning, the definitive oral history of The Sopranos, and wrote the novel The Perfume Burned His Eyes, in which he is currently adapting as a screenplay. And with that, I'm going to turn it over. So thank you so much, Alice. Oh, wait.
Green light.
Yeah, we got
All right, hello. Can people over there see? Should we move up a little bit?
Sure.
Let's scooch.
This,
Hello? Let's get intimate.
You can come further if you want.
All right, whoa, all right. Just come sit on our laps, all right? That's,
Whatever you like.
like Santa Claus. All right. So, I talk, you talk?
well,
Can I just tell a little story about how we came to be here?
that's a good idea.
So, I heard through my bookstore operatives, aka Claire from McNally Soho, I'm blowing her cover. I got a DM with lots of exclamation marks saying, Michael Imperioli is buying your book. So for the next couple weeks, I ruminated on Michael Imperioli reading my book. I thought, what chapter is he on? My God. And then rumination turned to celebration, and he posted about it. And I was so thrilled and moved, and I slid into his DMs. I don't know if that's a sexual. No, I didn't do that. I said hi in DMs. And we had tea, and here we are talking about my book. And I just want to say, I mean, you do so many things. You act, you're a musician, you're a writer, and you're an activist, but the way that you champion other artists is so generous and joyful, and I'm just so moved that I get to be one of those artists and that we connected and we're sitting here today. And I think it's a testament to this bookish community and how it brings us together and us together.
Yeah, especially this book. It was very moving. It's so honest and powerful and hopeful, and it just blew my mind, and I couldn't put it down, and I felt like I was in your head for the couple of days that I was reading it. So I'm really happy to be here tonight celebrating this book and Alice's work. We can jump into these questions. You're going to read
Yeah,
first.
I think
She's going to read
We're
the beginning
really
of the
well
book.
prepared. I don't even know where can I borrow
And
your
then
book?
we,
My book is here.
She's going to read first, and then we'll get into some
So,
conversation.
yes, so for those of you who haven't read the book,
get out. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to give a little synopsis. So I tell the story of being the daughter of two self-destructive, self-absorbed artists who lived in alternate universes where the power of their minds could shape reality. My mother was a famous artist whose implanted memories of satanic sexual abuse and murder made her hide in her work and kept her distance from other people. My father was a European sex symbol and anarchist who treated parenthood as a radical experiment in the total annihilation of boundaries. And I was sort of flooded by the torrential force of their impulses and desires, and I became everything. And then when I reached adolescence, a dissociative disorder called depersonalization wiped out the last puff of diffuse selfhood I had. I couldn't recognize my face in the mirror. I didn't know where my voice was coming from. I was disconnected from my body, my mind, my feelings, my history. I was convinced I didn't exist. I became nothing. And psychiatrists responded to this by prescribing more and more medication until a cocktail of 9 psychotropic medications triggered a massive psychotic episode that lasted a year and nearly killed me. And throughout all of this, my only tethers to myself and to reality were writing and my partner of 16 years, Gregory. And it was through his fastidious care and optimism that he taught me how to turn outwards and connect with other people and take care of my mom when she was diagnosed with dementia and confront and reconcile with my father. And he helped me write myself into a place where I could feel and feel for others. And I became someone. So that's what it's about. And I'm going to read from the beginning. Okay. My mother's disembodied voice came through the intercom. Alice, Alice. Or maybe it was Alice, Alice. Or maybe it was Alice, Alice. If I couldn't get to the phone fast enough, she'd hang up, and then I couldn't call her back because she kept her phone on privacy mode. She could reach me, but I couldn't reach her. I had to go looking for her to find out what she wanted. By the time I found her, she didn't seem to care why she had called me in the first place. Maybe my mother was just a voice in my head. Maybe I was just a figment of her imagination. She had put her bed in the 3rd floor pool room, which had a fireplace and views of her lush garden. During the day, she was below me, painting in one of her 2 downstairs studios, and at night she was above me in the pool room with her bottle of white wine and her books. My bedroom was below the pool room on the 2nd floor. The pool held 90 tons of water, and I could feel it all balancing over my head. As I lay in bed at night, I pictured the ceiling giving way. I wondered at the shape that water would take once it was cut loose from its parameters, violently free. The intercom connected us within the massive house in New York City. Our address was 134 Charles Street between Greenwich and Washington Streets in the West Village. We never got the numbers put on the door, so there was just a torn piece of paper with 134 written on it taped to the inside of the glass. It was a 17,000 square foot 3-story building with a concrete facade, large windows, and steel doors. The building used to be a factory for manufacturing train parts back in the days when trains ran along the west side of the island. On the ground floor was an office and a gigantic studio which led via a spiral staircase to an even bigger basement studio where my mother painted every day from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. with a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day. Between the office and the upper studio was a small room where my father lived after my mother kicked him out of her bed and before she kicked him out of the house. It was also where my Uncle Roy came to die, where Max hemorrhaged and Michael wept. It was where people came to lock themselves in and fall apart. The building had huge windows that let the world see us as we moved through the house. Once, for one of her lavish parties, my mother had the staff light hundreds of votive candles and line them along the windows. In the middle of the party, firemen in full gear stormed into the house, thinking it was burning down. A neighbor had misinterpreted the chic flicker of tiny candles as a deadly blaze. Or perhaps they had seen something in us, identified a threat that we couldn't see ourselves. On the second floor was my bedroom, a second room, which I called my study. Nanny's room, the library with a fireplace and rolling ladders that extended to the ceiling for access to the walls of books. The kitchen where Katie the cook prepared our meals, and the living room with another fireplace and a wall of windows that looked out onto a garden. Nanny was Eileen Dennis Maynard, who went by Dennis but was only ever called Nanny. She existed to everyone like a paper doll Mary Poppins, two-dimensional. Her life beginning and ending as the British governess paid to raise me. To me, she was a mother, but one who could be fired and disappear at any moment. The garden on the second floor had fruit trees and a koi pond and a spiral staircase covered in roses that ascended to another garden with a grape arbor and apple trees. My mother liked to be surrounded by things that were growing because she always felt she was killing things, that if she touched something, it would die. There was a tool shed, like on a farm. I'd never been to a farm, but I imagined that's what a farm was like, but right on top of the building in the middle of Manhattan. I liked to go in there and smell the fecund fustiness of the shed. The bags of fertilizer, rusting tools, and drying twigs created a tranquilizing fog that curled itself between me and the city below. Our world had all the disparate components of the world from which we were disconnected. Steel and trees, fire and water, soil and decomposition. There were no locks on the doors inside the house. The doors were just sheets of opaque glass and steel frames. Not even the bathroom doors had locks. Nanny once walked in on me masturbating and said, "Oh dear, I forgot you are a woman now," and walked out. Nanny once walked in on me cutting myself and cried. The locks meant I couldn't say, "Keep out." When I was 6, I put a no smoking sign on my door. It didn't work. My parents were both chain smokers, and their smoke entered the room before they did, making my eyes water and my throat itch. Only mythic beings could do that, make their presence known inside another person's body. The boundaries were porous. In this house, one could not tell the difference between fantasy and reality, art and object, parent and child. In this house, I couldn't tell what I was to my mother. In this house, I couldn't tell if I was my father's daughter, wife, or mother. The bathroom attached to my bedroom had 2 entrances, one from the hallway and one from my room. When my mother had parties and I was in my room, people sometimes didn't notice the door connecting to my bedroom and didn't close it, so I could hear them peep. Sometimes I could even see them if the mirror door reflected into my bedroom. I liked to watch them, and I liked the moment when they realized they had been seen. There would be a fat pause as they tried to remember what sounds they had made or what parts of them had been exposed. They would clear their throat before they zipped or yanked up their pants, before fabric fell back over knees. In this house, our most secret selves and our most private moments were meant to be spectated and thought about. The toilet flushed with an intensity that made me jump every time. The taps of the sink and bathtub and shower were marked with C and F for chaud and froid, the French words for hot and cold. People unfamiliar with the house often scalded themselves when they washed their hands. The house forced you to move differently. It could be a bewildering, even harmful place if you didn't know its rules. It was as if I lived inside my mother's mind. Everything had been designed especially for her and her alone. The space was built to accommodate the particularities and peculiarities of her gestures and habits. The house had many horizontal surfaces, daybeds, kitchen counters, spacious hearths, hardwood floors on which she could assume her typical recumbent pose, on her side, arm cocked to prop up her head while smoking or drinking or talking on the phone. She spread herself out on these domestic plateaus like Manet's Olympia, and life lived itself around her. She had transformed this place from a factory into a fortress, an irresistible nexus of strangeness, luxury, and niche functionality, the architecture of my mother's desires. Everything around us had her in it. She designed her own jewelry. A gemologist who rode a unicycle and had worked with the Hope Diamond was her collaborator. The pieces so elaborate that they tested the limits of engineering. She designed her very own uncomfortable furniture. She designed and commissioned our drinking glasses, hand-blown cylinders so light you could hardly tell there was anything in your hand. The concept behind them was to create something as close to nothing as possible, but still be functional. I hated them because I couldn't stop breaking them. And I had to use them because they were part of the fundamental routine of my life, which meant destroying them would also have to be a fundamental routine of my life. Even the most utilitarian aspects of our lives were impossible to negotiate. Conceptualized beyond utility, aestheticized beyond the physics of living.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Wonderful reader.
Thank you.
Yeah, not easy to read
Yeah.
and make it come alive like that.
I also narrate the audiobook, so buy the audiobook.
Let's focus on 134 Charles. As we just heard you read, you described growing up in this irresistible nexus of strangeness, luxury, and niche functionality, as if you were living inside your mother's mind. So do you see the house as a metaphor for your relationship with your mother?
Well, with Charles Street, there was a metaphor around every corner. It's a character. It was a character in my life. It was a character in the book. And to live in it was to be enwombed by it. So in that sense, it's a stand-in for my mom. But I think more than that, it was so improbable as a house. And it was my whole context. So my whole context was improbability. So I think it's really the architectural representation of the entire ethos of my family. We thought we were the exception to every rule. We thought we were exempt from reality. So I love thinking about it because it really is a metaphor for everything. It's a metaphor for dissociation. You have this disembodied voice of the intercom struggling to connect us, and that's what the dissociative experience is like. I feel like a disembodied voice struggling to connect. You have no locks on the door, which captures perfectly this feeling I have of these porous boundaries. I can't tell where I end and other people begin. I feel like an undifferentiated vacancy. I feel like anything could be what it is and also the opposite. I think even the highly neurotic purebred Welsh Terrier that would eat his own shit and then attack you if you tried to intervene is like somehow on brand too. So it is this convenient metaphor for everything.
Speaking of boundaries, which is something that you bring up many times in the book, in many different ways. There's a quote, "At any moment, things would lose their shape and spill over onto everything." That's the end of the everything section. And then this one really stands out. Currently, she cannot locate an outer psychological edge where she ends and something else, a desire for someone recognized as separate from herself, or a metrical world not subject to her fantasies, begins. And that was from the hospital.
Right.
That was an evaluation written by a doctor at the hospital.
Right, exactly.
About where you were at.
Yeah.
Even your mother had cervical cancer and the wound got infected, and you described the wound as, you say, the boundaries between internal and external eroding. And then you mentioned, you just said boundaries between moods had grown dangerously porous.
Yeah.
How what does this mean? In the boundaries, like your father was inappropriate.
Right. There was an indiscriminate sharing of information too. So it's physical, it's existential, it's
emotional.
Right, exactly. It's verbal, it's emotional, it's this free flow of just indiscriminate sharing. And I think, I don't know if you asked a question yet, but I think,
No, I'm just bringing it up as a point because it's so prevalent and it's so you weave it. You weave it in
Absolutely.
the theme so well into the book. You know,
I mean,
it's
it
very
really,
clear.
it was really inhabiting that gray area and that liminality was really important for me, not only in constructing the dissociative experience accurately, but also kind of showing what it was that enabled me to fully embody my parents' experiences and other people, to not center, even though this is my memoir, I tried not to center myself. I couldn't center myself because I have no center. It's just incoherence in here. So I think while that almost destroyed me, it also is the thing responsible for the beating heart of the story.
Which reminds me of the two quotes you used right at the beginning of the book, where danger is, grows that which saves also, by the German poet, philosopher Friedrich Holderlin, which reminded me of, from the Gospel of Thomas, one of the Gnostic Gospels, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you.
Yeah. And the dissociation, it nearly killed me. It continues to make my life really hard, but it is responsible for me being a storyteller, and it's responsible for me rebuilding my family.
What I want to ask is, considering this issue of boundaries, a lack of boundaries, and the effect they had on you, it was so multifaceted, this effect, and internal and external and emotional. How does one move past that? How does one conquer that? How does one create boundaries that are?
I was hoping you could tell me. If anyone, raise your hand if you know and can tell me, because it would really help me out. Boundaries. I mean, for me, writing is the only place I feel safe and safe to make a decision, because doubt is so intrinsic in the dissociative process. So writing is the only place I don't doubt myself, or when I do doubt myself, I feel safer to doubt myself. So it's been that, and it's been having a really loving, safe relationship with someone who shares my fundamental allergy to consciousness, I guess. So Gregory, I'll kind of wake up every morning, I'll go, oh my God, this isn't normal. This can't be normal, being conscious. And he's like, it's totally weird, but it's just chill. It's chill. And so that's really helpful.
You started writing very young.
Yeah.
Yeah, like how?
I mean, okay, so I would count this as writing, but I used to think in the third person. I would think about myself in the third person. I would say, she is walking down the street, the rain falls on her jacket. Sort of turning myself into a story, speaking myself into being. So that was a very boundaried experience, where if I could turn myself into a character and into words and confine myself to a page or to a story, I wouldn't just float away. So I think that.
But you mentioned like writing short stories and
Yeah,
a novel, and the novel you were what, teenager?
Yeah,
when you
so
wrote your first novel.
The writing started first as triage. It was to keep myself alive. And I would write and write and write and write, and then after this started out as short stories about every time I'd ever been to an emergency room or hospital or taken someone there.
This book
Yes.
started out as
Yes.
that.
And I've never not been writing it. It's taken forever. But no, I mean, just because I live, never not been writing it.
So some of this
I'll
was
be
how old, like started, some of these sections?
I would be sitting on a gurney after having sliced up my arm, scribbling away details about what the nurses said behind me, or when I was having a dissociative episode, I would write lists of the things the person that had dissolved used to like, the list of my favorite things. And then when I freed myself of the over-medicating, when I got sober, I just gave myself a little reflex. I'm alive, guys! I have a body. It became really about turning outward and connecting with other people. So it really, it kind of changed. And then when I had the dissociative episode, that's what motivated me to confront my father. And my father had behaved very inappropriately in his desire for specialness and to be unique with his children. Like, he told me to lick the tears from his eyes when I was 7. He organized a nude photo shoot on a horse in a forest when I was 17. He wanted to revolutionize cinema by having a father and daughter play love interests and fuck on screen. And he wanted us to play those parts. So, God, what was it? That just distracted me completely, my own story.
Just talking about writing.
Yeah. So just, you know.
How
So anyway, after I confronted him, I had this dissociative episode. Thank you. You just witnessed a dissociative episode right now. So I confronted him because I had completely dissociated. I had completely dissolved. Whoever I was had just crawled to the back of my mind and was peering out at an unrecognizable world. And I had to rebuild myself from these raw materials. So I went and I confronted him, and he responded with such empathy and appropriate shame. And that's what the book kind of became about, connecting with other people. And when I landed on the title, I got to go back and see all the poetry and parallels that were just lying scattered around my life. And it was like being introduced to myself for the first time.
Wow. That's amazing. And
I'm very grateful to it for it.
How you helped your father see that moment of reflection, which he never probably had, right?
Right, exactly.
I'm going to move on to a different topic. Your mother, Jennifer Bartlett, recalls horrific incidents of satanic ritual abuse, including murder that took place during her childhood, memories that traumatized her and influenced her work. How did the stories around Jennifer's recovered memories affect you? Maybe talk about the similarities and differences between both your experiences in therapy and the relationship between trauma, truth, and self-mythology. Maybe unpack a little what these memories were and
I'll give a little context.
Yeah.
I might distract myself with my story again, so
Go
you have to
ahead.
remind me of the question. But so my mother was a victim of something called the Satanic Panic, which was a moral hysteria in the 80s and 90s, where people were convinced that children were being used in satanic sex cults. People went to jail for it, daycare workers, parents, and then a side effect was that these overzealous clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, would, through methods of persuasion and psychology, implant false memories of satanic abuse. It wasn't malicious, it was just profoundly misguided. So my mom went to a very renowned psychiatrist with pretty innocuous complaints, and she came out believing that she had been used in a satanic sex cult. And I found this out when I was 11 years old, and I was snooping through her stuff to find a witness list for my dad of the witnesses she was going to call in the court case, the custody case. And in it, I found her journals. And I read an excerpt that said, I was giving Macho, that's my dad, a blowjob, and I had a flashback of Russell holding my head underwater while I threw up, and he said, "You're feeding the fishes."
And Russell was...
Well, we're about to find out. And she came up to take the nap she took every day. She took a 2-hour nap every day. And I said, "Mom, what does this mean?" And she sat down and very matter-of-factly, as if I'd already heard this all before, told me the following story. She told me that she and her 1.5-year-old brother had been used in a satanic sex cult that was led by Bertie and Russell, a married couple who were friends of the family, and that they used the children of the maids in the neighborhood in ritualized sex games and orgies, and that they had murdered a 7-year-old boy through erotic asphyxiation and made her, my mom, bury the body on the beach. And then she went and took her nap. And then I got up, wondering how to spell erotic asphyxiation, and I wandered out into the hallway where on the walls were all of the massive oil paintings she had done of this alleged abuse. So I stood there looking at a scene where my mom, I now realize this is a scene of my mom burying a body on the beach, and I realized in that moment I couldn't tell what had happened to her, what had happened to me. If it was the same, if it was different. And then I realized the power of telling your story and then just going to take a nap. And I think what the fiction seduced her because of two things. I think you mentioned mythology. I think there was a lot of self-mythology. Is this working?
Yes.
Okay, great. She would really mythologize herself. She wrote a thinly veiled autobiography called History of the Universe, which makes her the universe. And also on brand. And when you're the universe, I think the only worthy opponent is Satan. And I also think she was in a lot of pain. And I think when the culprit for your pain is Satan, it exempts you from having to overcome that pain. And it makes it okay to hide and work and whine and yeah. And I think I relate. I went to this treatment center where they convinced me that my father had molested me physically, which was not true. But I think being an artist and being a dissociator, there's a lot of living in the gray area. And I think when you kind of abide in that liminality, these rigid distinctions like monster and evil and Satan feel so good in the brain. It feels like almost luxurious. So for me, I think I learned there's a good way to live in the gray and there's a damaging way to live in the gray. And I learned that many things can be true and how to stay coherent in that revelation.
You mentioned you were jealous of your mother's abuse that she wrote about because it was an excuse for everything, right?
And it made her really special. Like if Satan picks you to mess with, like God, you must have something going on, you know?
Now, was there any truth to these stories? I mean, what did you ever find that out? Did your mother find that out?
She hired a private detective. They didn't find anything. She confronted the couple. Obviously, they denied it. I personally don't think it was true.
No.
I think something happened. I mean, she was a woman in the world. I know something happened. Was it Satan? No. Was there murder and orgies? And no, I don't think so. But I think something happened, and I think she was in a lot of pain, and I think she was taken advantage of. And I think she desperately, desperately wanted to tell a story, and this was a very, I mean, how could you not be taken in and riveted by this story?
The vivid sensory descriptions of dissociation are among the most compelling parts of the book and capture the experience in an almost tangible way for the reader. You describe feeling your eye slipping through your fingers like a heavy, slick rope, feeling as if each moment was the first moment in the history of the universe when things were just taking shape, though never forming something solid. Holding a cup of water and feeling like there was nothing separating the water from me, looking into the mirror, as you said, and being unable to unlock or lock into place that it was me, my face. What was it like to try to articulate something that seems to defy expression or easy expression? And what is your relationship to this dissociation today?
It's spooky just hearing it now. It's one of the... What was really important to me in this book was to help people inside of the dissociative experience articulate it, and then help people outside of it understand it. And it's notoriously language averse. It's so hard to describe. But even when it was a challenge to find the right words, it was precisely that difficulty that kept me anchored in the dissociative void. And I think I started learning, as we talked about with the quote, the Hölderlin quote, that the dissociation ended up giving me back everything I needed to stay alive, even though it almost killed me. And my relationship to it today, I've never come out of it. I'm dissociating constantly. It's happening right now. It's very scary, and I have this dear friend, Neil Thies, who is a genius doctor, a writer, a Zen master, and he jokes with me that it sounds kind of like an aspirational state. So at any moment, I'm kind of like, well, this could be a glitch, or it could be transcendence. So maybe it's both at the same time. I don't know. But
Have you spoken to a lot of people who have a similar,
I met one of the most moving moments of coming out with this book was I met someone who, I've never met someone who dissociates, depersonalizes specifically. Depersonalization, derealization disorder is what I have. And I've never met someone who dissociates to the level that I do until I met this one person who said they give the book to all of their friends and family to better understand them. And we had this game that we played where we would I would be like, what about when you're at an airport and you get to the gate and you're not sure if you're there because you don't know if you know how to read letters and numbers anymore? And she was like, well, but what about when you get on the plane and you don't know if your body got on the plane? And I was like, yes, that's exactly right. And then recently, it's been really powerful because I was asked by the head of psychology in the PhD program at Vanderbilt University if I would speak to her faculty and students, and then I was asked to participate in a dissociation study. And for the first time, I got to fill in multiple choice about dissociation. And it was so powerful because the multiple choice was like, tell us about how much your body disappears. And I was like, yes, exactly right. And I never thought I'd see a standardized metric for it. And then I would talk to them and I would say, I would talk about my experience of pain or my experience where I'm terrified that I don't know how to process words for a moment, and they didn't look at me with blank stares. They were like, oh yeah, that relates to this, that relates to that. And it was the most hope I'd felt in a long time. So this book is responsible for a lot of the hope I feel.
I'm sure. I mean, it must give a lot of comfort to people who have that, disorder and read this and like, wow, to have somebody who's really describing what it's like and, hope that there's ways of, dealing with it.
Yeah.
Moving beyond, not just being destroyed by it, right?
I hope so.
How did writing a book change the way you see or understand your parents as human beings?
And this is particularly poignant because this recently was the second anniversary of my mom's death. So I've been thinking a lot about this. And I think one of the things I've realized is how scared my mom was. And for all of the grandiosity, for all of the muchness, she was really, really fucking scared. And she was scared of being human. And I get it because I'm scared all the time. And she confided in me once that she felt like an alien, and she felt like she was watching everybody else from behind a pane of glass, and she didn't understand why people did the things they did or what they were thinking. And as someone who dissociates, I of course understand that. I feel like an alien to myself. And I'm just realizing all of the things we have in common that could have brought us together, but instead kept us apart. And I think she would have had, or she had, the intellect and kind of like the sense of existential calamity to understand all of this incomprehensible shit that I'm trying to explain. So that makes me sort of sad. I think we also dealt with that both by working and in our work, the only advice she ever gave me was just do the work. So I continue to stay connected with her through just doing that. And I think also she talks about her famous piece, Rhapsody. Her motivation for making it was to create a piece of art that had no edges and no limit. And that was my preoccupation as a dissociator, having no limits, being undifferentiated. So I see these similar preoccupations. And then I think also I understood them because I wrote, like I had a poor me draft, I had an angry draft, I had all these iterations where I got to explore every facet of our relationship and then came to a more nuanced understanding. And then also I think doing the audiobook, I performed my parents, right down to the accent, the German accent. So I understand them because I became them. So it's really, I really feel so close to them, and I really feel I understand them after writing this.
We are going to open this up for questions. You ready for that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Who has questions for us?
And if there are none, maybe you have more?
I do have more.
Right here we have.
Oh,
See.
hi! Oh, a family question. Here we go.
No, I just want to hear about your craft
Oh, I love
of
it.
writing. Because you talk about family so much, but you don't talk about writing.
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. Okay, so I have become a lot less precious with my craft, which has been awesome. I used to only be able to write under very specific, perfect circumstances, and even not really then either. So now I have a couple of secret weapons. So one is I commit to the shit. I build mediocrity into the process. So I like make sucking a requirement. And I have a shitty draft, and that's what I'm supposed to have. When I'm working on fiction, I write two things at the same time, so that if I get spooked, I can just hide from myself in another one. And then my huge secret weapon that no one else can have is Gregory, my partner of 16 years. First of all, he can crack things emotionally open. Like, he knows exactly what a person and a story needs emotionally. But the way that I edited this book was to read the entire manuscript aloud to him 7 times. And he would pace back and forth, and then he'd go, "Wait, what are you trying to say? How do you feel?" And then I would shout sentences at him until one of us would go, "That's it," and then we'd high five. So that's my ultimate secret weapon. So thank you for that question, because I get to share his magic with everyone.
That first draft that the shitty draft,
Yeah.
do you show it to anybody?
I showed it to Gregory,
You show it to Gregory.
but no one else.
No
I
one
don't even
else.
talk about the idea.
Amazing.
Yeah. But Gregory, we are
Yeah.
like undifferentiated. We are the same. Doesn't count. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a Gregory-related question.
Oh.
I'm wondering, it doesn't seem that love and dissociation are very closely related or experiences. So what is that feeling for you, or what is a person with dissociative disorder's experience of love?
That is an unbelievable question. What Gregory has shown me has been a real pinch me moment. I think every day he's given me access to myself. It's sort of like he knows me so well that I can delegate my being to him, almost. Like, I can turn to him and be like, am I myself right now? What do I like? What do I do? And I can trust him to reflect me back to me. And I think the level of kindness and patience, with dissociation, for a lot of people, it feels like an out-of-body experience. There's someone someone watching me lead my life and have my emotions. And the love is refracted through all of those versions of me. And that's how intense it is, that it can survive being like departiculated like that in a way, where I feel like I've been blown into a million pieces and not one of those pieces has enough of me in it to be me. But what is in each of those pieces is my love for Gregory. And I think this book is, I'm really glad you asked the question, because this book is ultimately a love story. And I only survived because of two relationships. My relationship to writing and my relationship to Gregory. And I was loved and loved myself into being. And that's why I want to share that hope. I think that answers something.
Loved myself into being. That's great. That's beautiful.
Yeah. My editor. My brilliant editor. That's my other secret weapon. Julie Grau is my secret weapon too.
She's your editor?
Yes, the most precious,
Where is she?
exquisite. She's right there.
Raise your hand.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello.
Did you know she invented the comma in Girl Interrupted? Sorry, Julie. I just had to shout that out. So she does a lot more than that, but she doesn't get enough credit for that. It's iconic. Anyone else? Yes. Oh, hi.
Well, you sort of touched on the idea that being boundaryless could be sort of an aspirational state, and I was wondering if I'm not sure if you've like meditated or if that would be terrifying for you, and if that might have actually been one of the aspects of it, the lack of that, you know, the idea of boundarylessness that attracted Michael to the book.
That's a you question.
Oh, she was, if you didn't hear it, she's talking about the aspect of boundarylessness being an aspirational state, and asking about, has Alice tried meditation, and is that something that attracted me to the book? You know, I just, a friend of mine and Claire, who is with McNally Jackson, both said, you have to read this book, it's fantastic. So I, you know, was introduced to it that way. You know, that state that I think you're talking about through meditation is, you know, in Buddhism they talk about one of the major views of Buddhism is shunyata, which gets translated as the word emptiness, which is a horrible translation because it's not really about emptiness. It's really saying that we perceive the world through these five, you know, senses and these sense organs, and we're actually seeing it from a very, very narrow, subjective, tiny point of view. That's kind of a delusion. And our actual reality, which really goes in line with quantum physics, is that we're all part of this great kind of oneness on a very physical level. And that our mind, you know, that mind, consciousness, it, you know, unites us as well. So in some ways, this dissociation is kind of more in touch with, in somehow in line with the truth of things, you know, at least from a Buddhist perspective, which is very interesting. If you're not introduced to it through that kind of point of view, it can be extremely terrifying. So, you know.
Do you have any suggestions for how to embrace it?
I mean, I think if you start to, you know, look at some of the teachings, some of the great, you know, Buddhist teachers, and, you know, the Dalai Lama has had a lot of interdisciplinary talks with physicists about, and kind of the dovetailing between Buddhism and physics. You know, it's very interesting. And I mean, that could be a way, I mean, meditation's a lot about working with your mind, but if you come with that view of Buddhism, that view is very vast and very big, and yet, you know, knowing that, but then coming from a very personal approach to your own mind, those things together can somehow be beneficial, I think.
Okay.
But it is kind of fascinating what you're saying, and saying it as this aspirational place. But you know, in the midst of all the trauma and lack of boundaries and all that you were going through as a child, it's hard to kind of see that as something, positive and aspirational. But now that you have kind of grasped this whole thing and been through it, it could be something that that can really help.
I'll get there. Yeah.
I mean, I think you've gotten there, in a way that's about, when you're talking about love, and compassion. One of the things that really struck me was the compassion, I think, that came through that. And why I wanted to ask you about how you see your parents, and I got that from you, talking about them. It's like, that's wisdom,
And I think what I realized is, like, the love was there. It just felt and looked different,
Right.
but it was always there. And I see that. And I just see that it had to be translated.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, to be able to see that and get through that, and I think it's very inspiring.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really, really is.
Was there one more back there?
She had a question.
Hi.
I was wondering, so do you consider writing to be something that really helps you with dissociation, or do you consider it its own form of dissociation?
Oh, great question. So she's asking, does writing help my dissociation, or do I consider it another kind of dissociation? I've actually been thinking a lot about this, especially the more I contend with my scrolling and other ways, fucking TikTok, other ways I numb out and dissociate. I find the writing, and it's also something I want to tell myself out loud, the writing is safe. The writing helps the dissociation. The writing maybe is that aspirational dissociative state. Maybe that's the way in. Because I feel most myself, I recognize myself in my voice. I recognize myself in the choices that I make, in the words that I choose, in the order that they go in. So it's kin to that dissociation, but it's on my side, for sure. Great question.
This is just more of a practical question. When you went to the Columbia Writers Program?
No, I went to
okay.
undergrad. I've never studied writing.
Oh, okay. That was my question. It was going to be if you felt like you were in a workshop environment and how it.
I've never been in a
affected
workshop
writing.
environment, no.
Great. That's pitchy. I just thought that I was curious about that impact and that type of interaction. So do you have a?
I studied psychology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Good
good.
question.
Thank you. That's good. It's good to know.
Yeah.
Somebody over there has a question.
Cool. Hello.
Oh, he's scratching his head. So.
Oh.
I think Claire's going to close it out.
Yeah,
I'll
I'll
get out right
wrap it
here.
up.
Yeah.
This is fun, you guys.
I just want to applaud your tremendous courage. Which is, I mean, it is. It takes a lot of courage to be so honest, and I think that courage is helping a lot of people.
Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Thank you, Michael. And thank you so much for doing this. I'm moved by it. And thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, guys. Okay, I think we can give it up a little louder for everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you both. Amazing. I love listening to you both. You should have a podcast. Consider it. That aside, we are gonna redirect over into the signing portion of the evening. If you did not yet purchase a book, don't worry. You're in a bookstore and we have it. So if you want, you can purchase it downstairs. You can use those $5 vouchers for it. And if you already have the book, we're gonna ask, and you want it signed, we're gonna ask you to make a nice little line facing that end of the upstairs. And once again, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for writing this book. Thank you, Michael, for loving this book after I told you to read it.
Thank you to Claire, everyone, for making this happen.
It's just kismet. It's the universe. So let's leave it there. Thank you again. Again, if you need the book, it's downstairs.
And he's signing books too.
Oh yeah, and if you are here, Michael will be available for signatures as well. If you are into that. So anyway, signing that end of the floor, and we'll. Thanks so much for everyone else coming out. Have a good night.